Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Festus. If you're watching for the first time, thank you for joining, and if you're a returning viewer, thank you for also returning. So if you've been watching this channel, you'll notice that we've been doing a lot of talking about tech, everything tech, and I've decided to get my hands dirty and you also join in the fun. Hence why today I'm starting a series that will be titled Let's Talk About Linux. So today's video is going to be the first video on that series. So I'm not exactly sure if you know it as Linux or Linux, regardless of however you know how to pronounce it. We're talking about this interesting logo right here, pronounced as this. So moving on, let's jump straight into the basics and introduction of Linux, as that is the proper way to begin our series, right? So let's get started. First, what is Linux? What is Linux? For the sake of how I know to pronounce this, I'm going to stick with Linux. So what is Linux? Linux is an operating system. Basically, that's a simple way to define it. If you're watching this video, I trust you know what an operating system is. And if you don't, an operating system basically allows us to manage the communication between our software and hardware resources. So without the operating system, the hardware would not be able to house or hold any software, and the software in itself would be unable to function because a software cannot work without an operating system. So an operating system allows us to create that communication between the two. So examples of operating systems include Windows, iOS, macOS. So Linux is also like these other guys in that it is an operating system. Now, if you don't know the difference between iOS and macOS, the simple difference is iOS runs on mobile phones, Apple mobile phones, while macOS is the one that runs on the computers. So moving on, why should you use Linux? Why do you need to learn Linux? That is what this video is actually about today. Now, there are several reasons to learn Linux. The reasons are endless. Overall, it is the best operating system that exists, point blank. But the most important ones are the ones we are going to be talking about today. So the first reason why you would want to learn Linux, the first reason why it is beneficial for you to actually jump on this is the fact that it is everywhere. Now, Linux operates on several systems, from embedded systems, desktops, servers, mobile phones, computers, and what have you not. You might have heard of Android, which is pretty much everywhere. So everyone obviously knows what Android phones are. So we're talking about the Samsungs, the Huawei's, the HTCs, and so on. Now, Android is a Linux operating system. It uses a Linux operating system, and it has been around. Linux in itself has been around since the 90s. So learning Linux is going to actually broaden your scope and understanding of how computers actually work, because you get to, be able to get your hands dirty. So moving on, the next one, we've already said a bit about it, but I'm just going to give it to you anyway. The next one is career prospects. So the fact that Linux is everywhere makes the career prospects huge. The job opportunities out there that requires you to know Linux is a lot. On the server side, you have server administration. So you get to administer servers that are solely based on Linux. On the mobile web and every other part, you have like Linux administrations. Even nowadays, we've got DevOps engineers, site reliability engineers, even software developers now need to know Linux. So you actually learning it is beneficial, because going further, pretty much every field that will be out there would require you to know Linux. Network administrators, network engineers, cybersecurity analysts, cybersecurity engineers, whatever it is. These days, Linux is pretty much a must. Now moving on, the next thing we are going to be talking about is stability and security. Now, unlike Windows and macOS or iOS, Linux is pretty much everywhere. And this is the reason why there are lots of, engineers, lots of people who are contributing to it. One thing that I didn't mention before saying this is that Linux is actually open source. Now, what this means is you can grab yourself a copy, get down to the, the source code, alter it, change it, make it suit however you want, make it, do whatever job you want to do. And because this is possible, a lot of engineers from, different parts of the world have taken Linux, made it their own, and that's why we have different flavors of it. Now, this is the sole reason why the stability and security that comes with Linux is incomparable when you look at, when you compare it to Windows and Mac OS. It is incomparable. While these other two are owned by a single company, Linux is open source, and because of that, there is a huge number of people supporting it. The community is really huge, and because of this, every day there are new releases, and that is why it remains the top when it comes to stability and security. So there are tons of reasons, like I said, 1 million reasons why you need to learn Linux. These ones just happen to be the most important ones that I think are worth considering. And to summarize this video, saying you need to learn Linux or you need to know Linux has nothing to do with you actually buying a Linux-based computer. So if you want to buy a computer, you can still buy a Mac OS, you can still buy Windows computer. In fact, it only makes sense for you to choose either of these two. Reason being, I don't think it is actually smart to own a computer that is just pure Linux. Reason is because you have other applications and stuff that require you to have either a Windows computer or Mac OS computer, because these are the ones that are commonly used by, users out there. An example would be myself or someone else who is probably into graphic design or video editing. Imagine if you have 7 to 10 years of experience using Photoshop or say Final Cut Pro or something, and then you have to switch to a Linux-based computer. First of all, these applications might not have support for Linux. And even if there is an alternative, the alternative will definitely be different from what you're used to, and might even require you to pay for another license, even though you already have one for the other. So it would make sense for you to have either a Windows computer or a Mac OS computer, and then virtualize the Linux part of it. So you use a VM to actually house that particular operating system that you want on this other one. And on that, that's where we end the first video for today, guys. See you next week.